Us, everybody, welcome to the GrandTorino. Today, very delighted to have Kate Lawlor. We're going to speak on a few matters today about the upcoming abortion referendum, and we've, as I say, the GrandTorino purports to be an open platform, so if anybody wants to reach out and have their point of view brought in as well, you're more than welcome to reach out. A quick shout out to all my patrons, all the donators to the cryptocurrency. And again, as I always do, I ask you if you're any monetary value, please make a donation and we'll help raise the platform. We're doing our very best to open up the conversation. Kate, delighted to have you with me today.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, just for our audience there today, can you just give us a brief background review?
Sure, yeah. Kate Lawlor's name, as well said. I have been an activist for the pro-life, pro-baby, love both cause for a number of years. I also ran as an independent candidate a couple of times in 2 general elections on what were, I suppose, at the time not very popular platforms. Eurosceptic first time around, and in the last general election I ran as a pro-life candidate, basically to raise awareness, because as you probably know, all candidates in an election are supposed to get the same media platform.
Yeah.
So it was an issue that wasn't really being discussed in the last general election, but it was one that we all knew was going to come up, that there would be a push to repeal the 8th, so there weren't that many candidates. There's no candidates in my constituency even talking about it at the time. A couple of them actually have completely jumped off the fence and gone to our side at this point, but at that time there wasn't. So I ran in the last general election to raise awareness about that issue.
Very good. As I say, we're getting close to the upcoming referendum, as it says.
25th of May. Get out there and vote, everyone.
How do you think campaign's going so far, for your side?
It's been great. I've been involved with an organisation that does media workshops, chatting to people and giving them some pointers, giving them some information that you don't get in the mainstream media, and also organising canvas teams. The canvas is going really well. We're being received really well on the doors. Very high percentage of people who are profoundly decided on a no vote. There's kind of a 20% maybe across the spectrum of age and social demographic that they're not really sure, but they're very receptive to what we have to tell them, and they're very open, and we listen. That's a lot of what we do on the canvas. We talk to people because we find that a lot of people have questions and they're not very clear about exactly what it entails if we repeal the 8th Amendment, or if in fact why it should be repealed. So it's good to get a chance to talk to those people, and they're happy to hear this side of it, because it seems the mainstream establishment media and all the establishment politicians are just pushing for a yes vote without really giving the broader discussion an airing. As you say, not a really nuanced conversation and stuff like that. So you're getting, would you say a mixed reaction or a very positive reaction to your case? Very positive, and the feedback I get from all the canvassers that I've been talking to, because when we do the workshops, we get groups of people in communities together and we have chat, and we give them some information that they mightn't already have and some encouragement to get out there and canvass. And a lot of them approach the canvas with a great deal of trepidation. And then we touch base with them after the first couple of evenings of canvassing, and they've all come back with the same reaction, going, wow, it wasn't terrible at all. In fact, people were so open and so friendly, and such a positive reaction, and quite a lot of enthusiasm for actually retaining the 8th Amendment and not repealing it. And there's no appetite out in the general public in Ireland for the kind of abortion legislation that the establishment is trying to bring in if we repeal the 8th. So, it's been a very positive experience.
Yeah, the media there, so from your perspective, why are you advocating no?
Right, well, for a start, we've had the 8th Amendment for decades. It has saved lives. It has absolutely saved many children's lives. It has saved women from rushing into a decision that they may later regret. Despite the kind of scaremongering that's going on in the media, in 22 years in this country, we have had one direct maternal death. And that wasn't even related to the rulings under the 8th Amendment. It was due to sepsis and not being detected and not being appropriately and quickly enough treated. So there's this kind of manufactured consensus out there, and there's this false narrative in almost all of mainstream print and broadcast media that the 8th Amendment is putting women's lives at risk. You know, we have thousands and thousands of Irish women in Irish hospitals having babies all the time. We're not losing them, they're not dying, they're not at risk, they're being well cared for. I mean, we have lower maternal mortality rates in this country than several other jurisdictions, and namely the UK and the US. We have much, much lower and better care for women in hospital who are having babies and lower maternal mortality than the UK and US. And the kind of legislation that the government is trying to bring in if we repeal the 8th is what they've actually got in the UK. And insofar as the death from sepsis that I mentioned, 12 women on average die from maternal sepsis in the UK annually. You know, so there is no link between a maternal death from sepsis and our 8th Amendment. It's got nothing to do with it. But it has been pushed out there that it has to be repealed because women are in danger. And you know, it's pretty bogus and it's dishonest. It's a misrepresentation. So I feel that there's a huge push to repeal this amendment. Once that amendment is gone, there's no protection, no recognition in our constitution for the right to life of an unborn child. None at all. So what it does is it leaves it in the lap of whatever government is in office over the coming years to legislate as they will. You know, and we won't be, as the public, we will not be asked again if the 8th is repealed. We'll never be asked again if there's a decision by a new political party to further liberalise the kind of legislation that they're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, we won't be asked. If the 8th is gone, that's it. There's no recognition, no right to life from unborn children. So it's important that it stays in there because it hasn't done any harm. It's actually protecting children and babies.
Per, quick question from my perspective. We're going to have, should the worst happen and the repeal is enacted or whatever, what is there third party sort of companies, is there third party alternatives waiting to come into this country to swoop in?
Well, yeah, because I mean, there's actually, can I encourage people to have a look at this, to go on gov.ie and have a look. It's called the General Scheme of a Bill to Regulate Termination.
Is that online?
It's online, gov.ie.
I'll put a link to that in the description box.
It's the heads bill. So you'll see a lot of provisions inside that if you have a look at it. There is a clause for conscientious objection because there are a great deal of GPs, nurses, midwives who are not in line with this. In fact, I was at a conference last Saturday in the Alex where there were 100 medics. I was in a room with 100 medics. None of them struck off, all professionals, all very competent, who are firmly opposed to repeal of the 8th. So there will be a lot of doctors, obstetricians, nurses, midwives in this country who will be conscientiously objecting. So it may be difficult to find places and personnel that are willing to carry out abortions. So yeah, of course, there are organisations waiting in the wings to come in. It's an industry. You know, at the end of the day, it is an industry. So there will most definitely be parties outside of Ireland coming in to set up abortion facilities. You know, so that's.
And how do you think the general conversation is out with the general public, as in the media? How is this all being portrayed?
Well, you know, it's very biased because even on the canvas, when we talk to people, they're saying there's some remarkably bizarre things being said. I mean, I had to, I managed very well to explain to a few people on the canvas, where there was one evening in particular, there were 3 particular houses I went to, over maybe 60, 75 houses, where people were saying, but the 8th Amendment forces women to carry a dead baby to term. And this is a bizarre thing to be put out there. It's so far from the truth, but also, if you look at the wording of the 8th Amendment, it is about the equal right to life of both mother and child. And sadly, of course, if a child has already died in the uterus, in the womb, we're not talking about protecting that life anymore. So that's not even under the auspices of the 8th Amendment. So there's a lot of misinformation in the media, and they're not giving a platform to people, especially, for instance, like the 100 medics, that were at that conference last weekend. It's very hard for anybody in the medical profession to actually be accommodated by print or broadcast media. And this is terribly unfair to the general public. You know, it's deceitful, it's a deception, it's misleading the electorate, only giving them the very, very pro-liberalised abortion side of this entire debate. So yeah, it's very one-sided. It's very difficult to get the message out when you don't have all of the mainstream broadcast and print media on your side, when in fact they're all on the other side.
So we seem to have a biased media, a biased liberal media, as you say. What about outside interference, NGOs?
Absolutely. I mean, we know it's been all over the news that Amnesty Ireland, Colin O'Gorman, has been a very prolific pro-abortion campaigner. The organisation Amnesty, I believe, was not founded under the kind of principles that he seems to be running it in Ireland now. Anyway, huge interference. Obviously, they got what was the figure now? 100 and something thousand.
Some big donations from Open Society, or
from George Soros.
George Soros again.
And that's the ones we know about.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah. I have no doubts, that there's plenty more, but that's an issue for maybe another conversation. But I really don't believe a billionaire from another country should be influencing the Irish electorate, should be influencing all of the Irish media and almost all of the Irish politicians. I mean, we are supposedly a democracy, aren't we? And it's the ordinary people of Ireland who should be making an informed decision about this really important subject. So
I think that's what a government fears most, is an informed public.
Of course they do. Citizen. Yeah, I think our government likes to think it's keeping us ignorant.
And I'd also add into the mix, like other billionaires that control our media here, they also seem to have a slant. I would say any billionaire that controls our media, it's their personal blogs, and nobody's going to write against their boss if their boss wants to push it in some sort of other direction.
Yeah, I mean, just step back from that. And think, somebody else is buying all the information that you're consuming in the print and broadcast media. And
showing you this side and not having a nuanced conversation, or giving you the broader aspect, the constitutional changes, any informed decisions on the medical applications and what's happening when it's being repealed and stuff like that. Yeah. I'll also suggest you now, walking around the quays here in Dublin, we travel. Like, I'll go the length and breadth of every different parts or every different town in Ireland and stuff like that. But it's very visible here in Dublin. You walk up and down the quays, there's two sides as the River Liffey passes through the centre of Dublin. It's very noticeable that there is only one posters that are all remaining on the lamppost. Could you speak to that for me?
Yeah. I noticed that too. I travel a lot around Dublin and the Midlands and around the whole country doing workshops. But in particular in Dublin City, I noticed that all the yes side posters are intact. The no posters are being removed, and a lot of them are being replaced with yes posters. There's been a serious amount of criminal damage to billboards and posters.
And it is against the law to touch, and if you're saying it's against the law, I must point that out to people as well.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that to anybody who's watching this. You see somebody interfering with a poster, regardless of which side, but there's been about 3,000 no posters have disappeared or been vandalised. This is a criminal offence. But of course, there's a process. You make a report to the Gardaí. There's procedures, and by the time all of that has happened, the 25th of May will have come and gone.
Yeah.
So the effect that the posters are supposed to have is not being allowed to happen. And that's a huge breach of our so-called democracy as well. I mean, those posters being removed, to me it says that the yes side is very concerned about this referendum, because we're not taking their posters down. We're not vandalising their billboards. We're not interfering with their campaign outside of the fact that, you know, we are on the no side, they are on the yes side, and we're both supposedly arguing our points. But to criminally interfere with posters and billboards, that shows that they're concerned, I suppose. You know.
Well, we're standing on the side of our argument, and we're allowing our argument to stand for itself.
Yeah.
Whereas I would say that the Liberals or anybody that's involved in removing posters like that can stand behind their argument and are using underhanded tactics to subvert what is supposedly a democratic referendum.
Yeah.
You know, stand behind your argument. Don't go to these underhanded tactics. I'm not telling you how to live your life, but you know, let's debate the argument.
Absolutely.
Let's work it out, and then we'll go to vote on an informed decision.
Yeah, personally, I'm happy to discuss and debate with anybody, any aspect. We've had conversations about this at different levels. I'm happy to take any aspect of this discussion, any argument that's being put forward in a balanced way. But I find that when I try to engage with somebody on the other side, it's just slam. You know, they don't want to hear the argument, they don't want to engage with it. They are parroting all of these worn out phrases like, you know, my body, my choice, woman's body. Well, you know, Biology 101 tells us that a baby growing inside the uterus is not part of my body. I've had 5 of them. I'm not missing any body parts, you know. This argument is so jaded and so tired, and I think those kind of arguments, they probably worked in 1974 with Roe versus Wade before all the technology that we now have. You know, we have 3D scans, we can hear a child's heartbeat, we can detect a discernible heartbeat at 21 days. All of these things were not available when globally abortion was accepted. But we are technically advanced now, and there's even viability, you know. Personally, viability 19, 20 years ago was in or around 28 weeks. I had premature twins at 29 weeks gestation, almost 20 years ago. And at the time, they were just 1 week past viability, and even my obstetrician said, wow, you're so lucky you got past that 1 week. But now we have babies born at 21 and 22 weeks. We have a number of babies that have survived and done very well after 22 weeks. 21 weeks is still quite premature, but it's still on that line of viability, and babies born at that gestation do survive. But we're talking about, and if you look again at this document, there's provisions in there for, in certain circumstances, for terminations up to 24 weeks. Now we're talking about past viability here. We're talking about babies that will survive, and in this heads of bill, the definition of termination of pregnancy, as opposed to a definition interpreted in the 2013 legislation, which would have been if there was a medical reason to end the pregnancy before term, that the birth would be induced and the baby would be then cared for in the same way as any premature baby is cared for. The definition is very clear in the heads of bill here. The termination of pregnancy is ending the life of the fetus. It's in black and white in that document. Okay, so we're talking about ending the life of a very viable child under certain circumstances. But the legislation that is going to be proposed, if the 8th is repealed, is not about special circumstances. And this is really important. This is what we've been telling when we're canvassing to people out there. This referendum, it's not that referendum you're voting for. You're being told extreme cases, extreme circumstances, extreme crises, distressed women, you're being told this. But what's being put in there is 12 weeks, 3 months, no questions asked, you know. And at 3 months, a little child in utero, a baby in the womb at 3 months can actually suck her thumb. You know, the body is formed. There's a head, there's a torso, there's arms, there's legs, organs are forming, even the ovaries are forming, where the eggs will be for your grandchildren if you're the woman, you know, carrying that baby. This reality wasn't available to people when abortion was globally accepted in the mid-70s and in the late 60s in the UK legislation. Every kid has a handheld device now. They can go online and they can look, they can listen to a heartbeat. They can look at a child in the womb moving around, reacting to its environment. So a lot of people are looking very differently at the notion of ending a 3-month gestation baby in the womb. But you know, I think a lot of the media and definitely the yes side are still using all those old worn out tropes, you know, this bodily autonomy. I mean, what are we talking about here? Our bodily autonomy, yes, as women, we have never had so much independence and freedom as we have now. Insofar as contraception, I don't know how many dozens of different forms of contraception are available to women. And there's nothing to prevent any woman in this country from availing of all of those. You know, our autonomy is about how we conduct our personal lives, and it's our choice, and nobody can stand over us on that. There's no moral aspect. There's simply, that's your autonomy. You do whatever you want to do with your body. But the baby is not your body. You know, the baby is a separate human being, unique, separate identity, separate DNA. It's a human being that, yes, is dependent upon your body for a little while, because that's how we all came about. There's no other way for the human race to continue. That's how every single person out there, every single woman out there with a banner going, my body, my bodily autonomy, she was inside her mother at some point, you know. So, you know, that's a really, I think it's a really dumb argument, because it's not like there's another alternative. There's nowhere else for us to grow, you know, for that 9 months. So those kind of arguments, when you drill down into them, they don't make any sense, you know. They don't make any sense at all. And as I say, we have autonomy. And, you know, they talk about extreme cases, and even sometimes the pro-life side, pro-baby, pro-woman side is a little divided at different levels on different aspects of, for instance, rape. The immediate aftermath of a rape. You can avail of the morning after pill up to 72 hours. In any pharmacy in Ireland, people, without a prescription, and there's nobody standing over you, there's nobody judging you. And the same applies for contraceptive failure. I mean, we are not this country that the media is trying to portray with all this very dramatic, dark chains, you know, morbid music, black jumpers. We're probably one of the most liberal countries in Western civilization.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't know. You know, the first time I went into a well women's centre and asked for the pill was 1986.
Can you talk to us about organisations that do help in crisis pregnancies for other situations, please?
Glad you asked me about that. You know, we often get in online debate and in actual real life debate, we often get told, oh, you pro-life people, you only care about the baby in the womb, you don't care about them once they're born, you know, which is another one of those silly things that gets thrown around with absolutely no basis. There are possibly up to a dozen organisations, I know off the top of my head 6 or 7 of them. There's Precious Life, and Precious Lives is about the families that have had that diagnosis, that maybe their baby may or may not survive the pregnancy, may or may not survive very long after birth, may have very, very serious life-limiting conditions. But I will say also, before I go on about the other organisations, there isn't a single obstetrician who can say with any degree of certainty when or if a child will live or die, or how, or indeed if those conditions are as severe as initially diagnosed. None of them can say with absolute certainty or precision. So what they're saying is probably, maybe, perhaps, kill the baby. You know, it's insane.
It's not an argument.
No, it's not an argument. You know, we don't take our weak and ill and vulnerable and dump them. We try everything we can to help them. And a lot of the people who are fighting for the 8th Amendment have been there. That's another part of this conversation you're not hearing. We are comprised of women and families who have experienced crisis pregnancies. We have so many women who have experienced abortion. You know, we're not living in a Disney movie where our lives are perfect. We've got this Stepford wife and perfect husband, lovely marriage, wealthy, suburban, wonderful, perfect life. We're being portrayed like that. Most of the pro-life people that I've engaged with over the last number of decades have been women who've had abortions, women who've had very sick babies, women whose babies have died, people and families who've experienced extreme crisis. We're doing this because we know, not because we are judging or looking down on, people who have had those experiences. But back to the organisations. There's Precious Lives, there's One Day More, there's Rachel Stinyard. Cura Care is one of the longer, more older established ones. There's Women Hurt, there's Unbroken.
All online as well.
They're all online, they can all be found online. Gianna Care, great organisation, one that I've done a little bit of fundraising with in the past. I ran Women's Marathon for them, and they're fabulous. And they also help women with counselling who have abortion regret. They'll help women who have economic issues, who maybe need somewhere to stay. They'll even buy nappies, cots, sheets, bedding, clothes, all of that practical support, moral support, whatever is needed. None of these organisations get help from the government. None of them. They actually don't even get a mention. They get blanked by the media because the preferred narrative is, oh, you don't care about them once they're born, you don't care about women in crisis. All of those organisations do. All of them. And if this 20 plus million that's been thrown away on this referendum was given to organisations like that, it would alleviate so much misery and stress.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're coming to the end of our discussion there. I think we've more or less covered nearly everything else there. If there's anything else you want to add there now before we wind it up?
No, I will say that previously it's been all, men shouldn't get involved in this debate.
Yeah.
No womb, no voice, no uterus, no voice. Suddenly, the yes side are marching all these guys out, these yes men, these men for yes. They're marching them out there. They've got their little posters all over the place and their t-shirts.
These male feminists.
Yeah, suddenly. And they're being marched out, and this is another sign that their campaign is clearly faltering. They had to pull in the reserves.
Yeah.
Had to get the old soy boys out. So there you go. That's
great stuff, Kate. Listen, great interview.
Thanks for having me here.
Down delighted. I'm sure we'll do it again. I'd also ask you, and I was just considering this while we were talking as well. Let's have a think about after the procedure itself. What happens after the procedure? Nobody's speaking about that. And I won't be too graphic on that, but you should. I encourage you all to do your research as much as is possible because it's not ceremonial, to say the least. With that, again, another great interview, and I'll thank Kate for joining us today. I'd ask you to smash the like button, as you always do. If you're new to the show and you want to keep up with these interviews or various other shows that we're doing, subscribe and press the little blue bell to remind you when we're doing live casts or when we're broadcasting these interviews. I encourage you all to return, and thank you very much for all your donations and all your support as we go forward. Wuss.